I wasn't looking for another woman. That's a lie. I was always looking. In the checkout line, at the dog park, through the window of a passing bus. A glance held a fraction too long, the specific cadence of a laugh from a nearby table, the way a stranger's hands moved when she spoke. My world was a minefield of quiet, devastating attractions I had sworn to navigate with my head down. After Maya, I had decided that looking was all I was allowed to do. Wanting was fine, as long as it remained a silent, internal hum. Acting on it was a catastrophe I had no intention of repeating. So when my sister, Jen, had called with her signature brand of cheerful tyranny and announced she'd set me up on a blind date, my refusal was immediate. It was also, as usual, completely ineffective. "Chloe, you can't just turn into a hermit with a laptop and a grudge," she chirped. "It's one drink. Her name is Sarah. She's a yoga teacher. Be nice," which is how I found myself standing just inside the door of the Gilded Vine, a restaurant whose name alone made me feel underdressed and over-cynical. The air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic and quiet money. I scanned the room, my stomach a tight knot of resentment. My instructions were simple: a woman with a red scarf, sitting alone near the window. And there she was. She wasn't wearing a scarf, but she was in the right spot, a solitary figure at a small table for two, gazing out at the rain-slicked street. The low light caught the sharp, elegant line of her jaw and glinted off the dark waves of her hair, which was cut in a style that was both sophisticated and just a little untamed. She looked calm. Grounded. Everything I wasn't. My heart gave a stupid, treacherous little kick. It was probably the yoga. Taking a breath that did nothing to soothe the frantic bird beating against my ribs, I walked toward her, weaving through tables of happy, oblivious people. This was a mistake. I knew it in my bones. But Jen would call to check in, and avoiding that interrogation was, at this moment, a more pressing fear than facing a stranger. I stopped at her table. She looked up and her eyes, a startlingly clear shade of gray, met mine. They weren't warm, not exactly, but they were deeply attentive. "Sarah?" I asked, my voice coming out thinner than I'd intended. A flicker of something, confusion, amusement, crossed her face before it settled back into a mask of polite neutrality. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. No, my blood ran cold. Of course. Wrong table. Wrong woman. My face burned with a humiliation so hot and swift it felt like a physical blow. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry," I stammered, already backing away. She was supposed to be. I thought. I gestured vaguely toward the window, the hostess stand, anywhere but at my own colossal stupidity. My mistake. Sorry to bother you. I turned to flee, to melt into the polished floorboards and cease to exist. Wait, the word was quiet, but it stopped me cold. It wasn't a command, but an invitation. I turned back. Her expression was unreadable, but she gestured to the empty chair opposite her. "You look like you could use a drink anyway. My name is Anya." My first instinct was to run. Apologize again, profusely, and retreat to my car to wallow in the full-body cringe I knew was coming. But her voice, low and steady, held me in place. And her eyes, they weren't mocking me. They were just watching, waiting. The sheer, unadulterated mortification was warring with a different, more dangerous feeling, intrigue. I was a ship caught between a hurricane and a siren's call. I can't. My date, I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy. A text from Sarah Yoga was waiting. So sorry. Running like 15 minutes late. Grab a table. Relief and dread washed over me in equal measure. She's running late, I finished lamely, holding up my phone as if it were evidence in my defense. I should just wait at the bar is crowded, Anya observed, her gaze sweeping over the packed counter without a hint of judgment. It was a simple statement of fact. And I was just about to order. "Please. My own company is getting tiresome." There was a subtle quirk at the corner of her mouth, a hint of dry wit that disarmed me more than a wide smile ever could have. It was the kind of humor that didn't ask you to laugh, but simply offered a shared observation of the absurd. Against every shred of my better judgment, I found myself sinking into the chair she had indicated. The plush velvet felt like a trap. "Okay," I breathed out. "Just until she gets here, of course," she said, her expression giving nothing away. A waiter appeared at her elbow as if summoned by telepathy. She didn't look at him, her attention still on me. "A glass of the Sancerre for my friend," she said, the word friend landing with a strange weight in the air between us. "And I'll have another," she said it with an easy authority that wasn't arrogant, just certain. The waiter nodded and vanished. I felt my posture stiffen. I was a charity case. The awkward stray she'd taken pity on. "You don't have to do that," I said, my pride flaring. "I can buy my own drink." "I know you can," she replied smoothly, her gaze unwavering. "But I invited you to join me. It would be poor form not to offer you a glass of wine." Her logic was impeccable, and it left no room for argument. It also, infuriatingly, made me feel even more off balance. I fell back on my default setting, defensive silence. I studied the table, the heavy silverware, the crisp linen napkin, the single, perfect gardenia floating in a small bowl of water. Everything was expensive and understated. I took in her clothes for the first time, a dark gray cashmere sweater that looked softer than anything I owned, a simple silver bracelet on one wrist. No rings. I registered that detail with a jolt that I immediately tried to suppress. Why did I care if she was wearing a ring? This was a temporary, deeply embarrassing situation, not anything. The wine arrived. I mumbled my thanks and took a sip that was far too large. The wine was crisp and cold, tasting of green apples and flint. It was, of course, delicious. "So," Anya said, leaning back in her chair. "Tell me about the yoga teacher." The question hung in the air. I felt like an insect under a microscope. I was supposed to be on a date with someone else, a fact that this woman was now a party to. The whole situation was a farce. "There's not much to tell," I said, trying for an air of nonchalance. "My sister's idea. She's decided my love life is her personal renovation project." The words were out before I could stop them, more honest than I intended to be with a complete stranger. Anya's expression didn't change, but I saw a new level of focus in her eyes. She tilted her head slightly, a gesture of genuine curiosity. "And are you in need of renovation?" she asked. Her tone was neutral, but the question itself felt deeply personal. I thought of the last few months. The empty space in my apartment that used to be filled with Maya's whirlwind of art supplies and passive-aggressive notes. The way I still sometimes reached for a second coffee cup in the morning. The hollow ache in my chest that had become my constant companion. "I'm fine," I said, the lie tasting flat on my tongue. I took another sip of wine, focusing on the cool burn as it went down. I was acutely aware of everything about her. The scent that drifted across the table wasn't a heavy perfume, but something more subtle. Sandalwood, maybe, and a faint, clean note of citrus, like bergamot. It was a scent that felt grounded and warm, and it made me want to lean in closer just to place it. I watched her hands as she picked up her glass. Her fingers were long and graceful, her nails short and unpolished. There was a quiet competence in the way she moved, a lack of wasted motion. She held the wine glass by the stem, her thumb and forefinger meeting just so. It was a small detail, but it spoke of a world of polish and poise that felt miles away from my own life of spilled coffee and freelance deadlines. I was staring. I realized it a second too late and quickly dropped my gaze back to my own glass, my cheeks heating up again. "So, are you waiting for someone?" I asked, desperate to shift the spotlight off me. It was a stupid question. Of course she was. Why else would a woman like her be sitting alone in a place like this? "Not anymore," she said simply. There was no sadness in her voice, just a quiet finality. Before I could process that, my phone buzzed on the table. A new text from Sarah. My heart sank. I braced myself for another apology, another delay. I glanced at the screen. "Something's come up, so sorry. Totally spaced on a thing I have. Rain check. XO." I stared at the message, at the breezy, dismissive XO. I should have been annoyed. I should have been frustrated that I'd put on my one good pair of boots for this. Instead, a wave of profound, unadulterated relief washed over me. It was so potent it almost made me laugh. And then I did. It wasn't a big laugh, just a short, sharp bark of sound that was equal parts bitter and amused. Anya raised an eyebrow. "Good news." "The best," I said, a real smile finally breaking through my carefully constructed wall of misery. "My date just cancelled." I showed her the phone, a giddy, inappropriate sense of freedom bubbling up inside me. I was off the hook. I could go home, change into sweats, and finish the project I'd been avoiding. I could go back to my safe, predictable solitude. But as I looked up from my phone and met Anya's steady gaze, a different thought surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. I didn't want to go. Anya read the text on my screen, then looked back at me. The corner of her mouth twitched again. "Well," she said, her voice laced with that same dry amusement. Her loss, the simple validation, sent a ridiculous warmth through my chest. Maya would have told me it was probably my fault, that I'd likely given off a negative vibe through my texts. Jen would have launched into a frantic effort to reschedule or find a replacement. Anya just stated it as fact. Her loss. I didn't even want to be here, I confessed, the wine and the absurdity of the evening loosening my tongue. My sister is relentless. She thinks if I just meet enough people, one of them will magically fix me. And do you need fixing? She asked, echoing her earlier question, but this time it felt less like an interrogation and more like an invitation. I hesitated. The honest answer was a raw, gaping wound. Yes. I am broken. I loved a woman who dismantled me piece by piece, and I don't know how to put myself back together. But you don't say that to a stranger, no matter how compelling her eyes are. Let's just say I'm in between projects, I said, opting for a metaphor I could manage. And not looking to collaborate, a solo artist, she nodded, as if this made perfect sense. I can appreciate that, she signaled the waiter again. Shall we order something to eat? To celebrate your narrow escape. I should have said no. I should have thanked her for the wine, and the temporary shelter from my own awkwardness, and made my exit. It was the sensible thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. But the thought of going back to my quiet, empty apartment was suddenly unbearable. The silence there felt loud, accusatory. Here, the quiet between us was different. It was calm, filled with unspoken curiosity. I couldn't impose, I started, the protest sounding weak even to my own ears. It's not an imposition if I'm asking, she countered, her logic once again unassailable. Besides, I hate eating alone, and just like that, I agreed. We ordered. I chose a pasta dish I couldn't really afford, feeling a reckless sense of detachment from my own life. Anya ordered a steak, rare. We talked. It was surprisingly easy. She asked me what I did, and when I told her I was a freelance graphic designer, she didn't just nod politely. She asked about my process, about what kind of projects I enjoyed, about the challenges of working for myself. She actually listened, her gray eyes focused on me as if I were the most interesting person in the room. In return, I learned that she ran a sustainable investment firm. She spoke about her work not with arrogance, but with a quiet, fierce passion that was captivating. She believed in using capital to build a better world, and as she talked about renewable energy and ethical supply chains, I saw a new side of her. This wasn't just a wealthy woman in a cashmere sweater, this was a woman who had built something, a woman with purpose. At some point, she shared a story about a disastrous business trip to Tokyo, where she'd gotten hopelessly lost trying to find a specific tempura bar, only to be rescued by a group of friendly high school students. She told it with a self-deprecating humor that made her feel accessible. Human. I found myself laughing, a real, genuine laugh that started deep in my belly. It felt foreign, like using a muscle I'd forgotten I had. For a whole hour, I forgot about Maya. I forgot about Jen's expectations and my own carefully curated misery. I was just a woman, having dinner with another woman. A fascinating, beautiful, and slightly intimidating woman. The spell was broken by something small. The salt shaker was closer to her, and I needed it. As I reached for it, my hand clumsy, she was already anticipating the move, pushing it slightly toward me. For a split second, the backs of our fingers brushed against each other. It was nothing. A flicker of contact, skin against skin, so brief it was barely a physical event. But it felt like a lightning strike. A jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity shot up my arm, straight to my heart, which gave a painful, violent lurch. I snatched my hand back as if I'd touched a live wire. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up, and she was already looking at me. Her mask of cool composure had vanished. In its place was a raw, unguarded expression of something. Surprise. Recognition. The same shock that was currently ricocheting through my own system. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clink of glasses, the low murmur of conversation, faded into a dull roar. There was only the space between us, now charged and humming with a tension that was terrifying and undeniable. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to speak, but no words came out. Her gray eyes, which I had thought were cool, now looked like a stormy sea, dark and turbulent. In that moment, the careful walls I had built around my heart didn't just crack, they crumbled into dust. This feeling. I knew this feeling. It was the terrifying, exhilarating free fall of wanting someone. Specifically, of wanting a woman. It was the specific alchemy of visual appreciation, intellectual respect, and a primal, physical pull that I had only ever felt a few times in my life. Each time had ended in a fire I wasn't sure I'd survived. And I had sworn, on the ashes of my last relationship, that I would never, ever let myself feel it again. I had failed. I had been sitting here for less than 2 hours, and I had completely, spectacularly failed. I looked away, my gaze falling to the half-eaten pasta on my plate. I felt exposed, as if she could see every stupid, hopeful, terrified thought scrolling behind my eyes. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I had to say something, do something to break the spell. "It's getting late," I said, my voice strained. "I should probably, let me give you a ride," it wasn't a question. She was already signaling for the check, her movements once again fluid and decisive, as if that moment of shared shock had never happened. But it had. I could still feel the ghost of her touch on my skin. The check came. She placed a black credit card in the leather folio without even looking at the total. The casual display of wealth should have been a red flag, a reminder of the chasm between our worlds. But all I could think about was the look in her eyes. I wanted to see it again. "You don't have to," I said, the protest automatic, meaningless. "It's starting to rain," she said, glancing toward the window where dark sheets of water were now lashing against the glass. "And I'm parked just out front." "It's no trouble," I didn't argue. A part of me, the reckless, self-destructive part one thought I'd buried, didn't want to. It wanted to get in a car with this woman. It wanted to see what would happen next. The car was as sleek and understatedly luxurious as she was. A dark, silent electric vehicle that smelled of expensive leather, and that same intoxicating scent of sandalwood and bergamot. The rain hammered against the roof and windshield, encasing us in a private, intimate world. The city light smeared into abstract streaks of neon through the water-streaked glass. For several blocks, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic thump of the windshield wipers and the soft hum of the engine. I was hyper-aware of her presence beside me in the driver's seat. The way the faint glow from the dashboard illuminated the strong column of her throat, the confident set of her hands on the steering wheel. I could feel the warmth radiating from her, a stark contrast to the cold dread coiling in my stomach. This was a bad idea. Every rational part of my brain was screaming it. She was a stranger. A wealthy, powerful stranger who had witnessed one of my most embarrassing moments. And I was a mess. I was a walking collection of baggage and trust issues, still raw from a breakup that had hollowed me out. I had nothing to offer a woman like her. "I live over on Ash Street," I said, my voice quiet, breaking the silence. "Just past the old library." "I know it," she said. Her voice was a low murmur, a calming counterpoint to the storm outside, and the one inside my head. The tension that had sparked to life in the restaurant hadn't dissipated. If anything, the enclosed space of the car amplified it, making the air thick and hard to breathe. I felt a desperate urge to fill the silence, to say something normal, to pretend my entire nervous system wasn't on high alert. "Thank you again, for dinner," I said formally. "And for not letting me die of embarrassment back there." She glanced at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "It was the most interesting thing that's happened to me all week," she admitted. "I was supposed to be meeting my brother. He cancelled at the last minute, so we were both stood up," I said, the symmetry of it feeling strangely significant. In a way we fell silent again, but this time it was different. It felt less fraught, more companionable. The shared confession had built a tiny, fragile bridge between us. I found myself wanting to cross it. I wanted to ask her about her brother, about her childhood, about what made her laugh. I wanted to know what she looked like when she first woke up, what music she listened to on rainy nights. The thoughts were dangerous, a cascade of wanting that I couldn't seem to stop. I clenched my hands in my lap, my nails digging into my palms. This was how it started. This hunger for details, this weaving of a stranger into the fabric of your own imagination. It was a path I knew led to heartbreak. I had to get out of this car. I had to get away from her. When she pulled up in front of my slightly shabby apartment building, the rain had softened to a steady, relentless drizzle. The streetlights cast a hazy orange glow on the wet pavement. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The engine was silent. The wipers stopped their rhythmic sweep. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. "Well," I said, my hand hovering over the door handle. "This is me." She didn't respond. She just turned in her seat to face me, her expression serious. The car's interior light cast soft shadows across her face, making her eyes seem even darker, deeper. "Chloe," she said, and the sound of my own name on her lips was a revelation. It sounded new. It sounded right. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped thing. I couldn't look away from her. The air in the car crackled, thick with everything we hadn't said. All the polite conversation, the shared jokes, the careful observations had led to this single, suspended moment. It felt inevitable. It felt terrifying. "I shouldn't," I whispered, the words a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of feeling that was about to crest. It was a protest aimed more at myself than at her. I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't let this happen. I shouldn't be this person, the one who falls so fast, so hard, so foolishly. Anya's gaze was steady, unwavering. She searched my face, and I felt utterly transparent, as if she could see every fear, every scar, every flicker of longing. "Why not?" she asked softly. The question was so simple, so direct, it disarmed me completely. Why not? Because I was breakable. Because the last woman I had let into my life had treated my heart like a temporary art project, to be admired and then discarded. Because hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. Because a woman like her, with her quiet confidence and her perfectly ordered world, could never truly want someone like me, with all my chaos and my damage. I opened my mouth to say all of this, to list my litany of failures and fears, to warn her away. But no words came out. There was only the sound of the rain, a soft, persistent tapping on the roof. And then, she closed the small distance between us. She moved slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to say no, to stop it. I didn't. I was frozen, caught in the high beams of her intention. Her hand came up, not to grab or to pull, but to gently cup my jaw, her thumb stroking softly against my cheek. The touch was electric, but it was also exquisitely tender. It was a question. My eyes fluttered closed. And then her lips were on mine. It wasn't a hard, demanding kiss. It was soft, questioning, a tentative exploration. It tasted of expensive wine and rain and something that was purely, intoxicatingly Anya. For a second, I was rigid with shock and fear. Then, a ragged breath escaped me, a sigh of surrender. My own hand came up, my fingers tangling in the silky hair at the nape of her neck. I leaned into her, answering the question her lips were asking. The kiss deepened, the initial gentleness giving way to a desperate, pent-up hunger. It was the release of every bit of tension from the evening, the mortification, the intrigue, the fear, the undeniable, terrifying pull. It was the breaking of a dam I hadn't even known was under such strain. It was confusion and clarity, terror and relief, all crashing together in a silent, breathtaking explosion. When the kiss finally broke, we were both breathless. I rested my forehead against hers, my eyes still closed, trying to anchor myself. The leather of the seat was cool against my back, the air was warm with our shared breath, and her scent was all around me. It was too much. It was everything. "This is a bad idea," I murmured against her lips, the words a last, futile attempt to regain control. "I'm a mess," I could feel her smile. "I'm not looking for perfect," she said, her voice a low rumble that vibrated through me. "I'm looking for you." The directness of it stole the air from my lungs. Before I could formulate a response, my phone, forgotten on my lap, buzzed and lit up the dark car. The screen read, "Jen. My sister. The architect of this whole disastrous, wonderful night." A wave of exhaustion hit me. I could picture the conversation perfectly, the barrage of questions, the well-intentioned but suffocating concern, the pressure. Without thinking, I reached down and silenced the call, letting it go to voicemail. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt monumental. I was choosing this moment, this car, this woman, over the demands and expectations waiting for me on the other end of that line. Anya's gaze dropped to my phone, then back to my face. She didn't say anything, but a flicker of understanding passed through her eyes. She'd seen my choice. She took my hand, her fingers lacing through mine. "Chloe," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "Let me take you on a proper date. Tomorrow." Lunch, it wasn't a command but a clear, concrete offer. A plan. It was a way of acknowledging the strange beginning we'd had and proposing a deliberate, intentional next step. It was her way of saying, "I see you, and I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." "Okay," I whispered. It was the only word I could manage. "Okay." She walked me to the door of my building, holding a large black umbrella that shielded us both from the drizzle. The silence between us was no longer tense, but filled with a quiet, humming energy. At the door, she didn't try to kiss me again. She just squeezed my hand. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll text you," I nodded, unable to find my voice. I watched her walk back to her car, a tall, elegant silhouette against the wet, glistening street. She got in, and the car pulled away with a soft, futuristic hum, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long moment, the key cold in my hand, the rain-washed air cool on my face. Then I went inside, up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. The silence that greeted me was different. It wasn't the loud, empty silence of loneliness. It was a peaceful quiet, a space to breathe. The air still smelled faintly of her, a ghost of sandalwood and citrus that had clung to my coat. I stood in the middle of my living room, and felt a tremor of something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was something more fragile, more tentative. It was hope. A tiny, flickering flame in the cavernous dark. I was terrified. But for the first time in years, I wasn't alone with the fear. I had chosen the wrong table, but for the first time, it felt like I might have stumbled into exactly the right place. Wouldn't you trade a lifetime of playing it safe for one chance at finding the person who sees you for exactly who you are? If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe for more, and let me know in the comments what you think.